Something extraordinary is happening right now. Boeing, once the ultimate symbol of American aviation power, is on the verge of collapse. After years of sliding sales and broken trust, the company is now pleading with Beijing for an order of 500 planes just to survive. Think about that. America's largest aircraft maker depending on China's approval to stay alive. If Beijing refuses, U.S. dominance in aviation could vanish overnight, with Airbus and France ready to take the lead. But Boeing isn't the only storm on the horizon. Across the Atlantic, Germany, the economic engine of Europe, is running out of fuel. Factories are slowing, exports are blocked by Trump's 15% tariffs, and energy costs have soared since Berlin cut itself off from Russian gas. The government is trying to paper over the crisis with billions in emergency spending, but the foundation of German industry is cracking, and "Made in Germany" risks becoming an empty slogan as plants close and jobs disappear. And then comes South Korea, another ally caught in Washington's tightening grip. Trump has pushed Seoul into a $350 billion investment program inside the United States, even while keeping tariffs in place. Korean companies are funding U.S. factories, buying American weapons, and issuing dollar bonds to help prop up Washington's financial system. At the same time, China is advancing in technology and shipping, leaving Korea trapped in a battle it cannot escape. So what happens when America is reduced to pleading, Germany sinks into debt and decline, and U.S. allies like South Korea are forced to pay the price? Who gains from this global shakeup, and who is left behind? Stay with me as we break it all down, because the reality unfolding right now is far more explosive than the headlines suggest. Boeing, the company that once stood as the crown jewel of American engineering, is now living through its darkest chapter. What was once the pride of U.S. industry has been reduced to a slow-motion collapse that is shaking the entire aviation sector. By 2024, Boeing was already drowning in debt, borrowing tens of billions just to stay afloat. Instead of stabilizing, the situation has only deepened, leaving America's aviation giant in a state of desperation. The problems have been building for years. The 737 MAX disasters in 2017 shattered confidence, grounding fleets worldwide and leaving lasting reputational damage. COVID-19 followed, crushing global demand for air travel. But the most devastating blow is happening now. China, the fastest-growing aviation market on Earth, has turned away from Boeing and thrown its weight behind Airbus, which is delivering aircraft by the hundreds. This isn't just the loss of one customer. China represents the future of aviation, projected to drive nearly 1/5 of global aircraft demand over the next 2 decades. Without that market, Boeing surrenders the century's greatest growth opportunity. That's why the company is pleading with Beijing for an order of 500 planes, $500 billion in contracts, tens of thousands of jobs, and America's aerospace prestige hanging in the balance. And this battle is no longer purely commercial. It's political. The U.S. government has tied Boeing's survival directly to trade talks. Trump has sought to package Boeing jets alongside agricultural and manufacturing exports, essentially telling Beijing, buy our planes or face harsher tariffs. But China has options, and it is planning for the long term. Airbus has already secured a dominant position, while China's own state-backed manufacturer, COMAC, is emerging as a serious rival. Its C919 jet is in service, with nearly 50 deliveries made domestically in 2024. With international certification on the horizon, COMAC is preparing to challenge Boeing and Airbus across Asia, Africa, and beyond. Backed by Beijing's political and financial power, COMAC gives China every reason to reduce reliance on Boeing. For Boeing, this is a nightmare. The long-standing duopoly with Airbus is breaking apart. Airbus is already profiting from Boeing's weakness, and COMAC's rise ensures Chinese airlines will increasingly buy local. The message is clear. Why trust an unreliable partner when alternatives are stronger and closer to home? Even Trump has shown frustration. He publicly criticized Boeing for repeated delays on the new Air Force One, a project meant to showcase U.S. engineering but now seen as another embarrassment. If Boeing can't deliver the president's plane on time, why would Beijing entrust it with 500? The consequences stretch far beyond one company. Every lost order means billions in revenue gone, tens of thousands of jobs at risk, and a growing perception that American industry is losing its edge. For much of the world, Boeing was proof of U.S. technological leadership. Losing China doesn't just endanger its future, it weakens the very image of America's industrial power. Boeing's collapse is not just a story about one company. It points to something bigger. When an industry giant starts to fail, Washington doesn't simply stand by. It steps in, and once that door is opened, the entire balance of American capitalism begins to shift. What used to be the domain of private shareholders can quickly become instruments of government policy. Think about what that means. A company like Palantir, already tied deeply to intelligence and military contracts, could move even closer to becoming a government-run surveillance arm. Defense giants such as Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, long seen as icons of U.S. military power, could slowly evolve from corporations chasing profits to entities that serve primarily as tools of the state. On the surface, this may look efficient. Companies secure steady funding and long-term survival. But the deeper reality is unsettling. America would be adopting the same methods it once accused China of using. State-directed capitalism. This process has already started. Washington recently took a 10% stake in Intel, one of the most important technology companies on the planet. This wasn't just a temporary bailout or a lifeline to get through a rough quarter. It was the U.S. government stepping in as a shareholder, with the power to influence strategy and decisions. For decades, American leaders condemned Beijing for directing its major industries through state ownership. Today, Washington is quietly doing the very same thing. And Intel is only the beginning. If the U.S. is willing to hold shares in a semiconductor giant, what's to stop it from doing the same with Boeing, Palantir, or even companies at the heart of artificial intelligence and defense? Officials are already debating these options, and as the economic pressure builds, those conversations are gaining momentum. The fact that these discussions are happening at all reveals just how fragile some of America's corporate icons really are. Without government backing, they might not survive global competition. The consequences don't stop at home. For international partners, every American company that relies on government ownership becomes a political purchase. If Boeing is sustained by Washington, then buying one of its planes is no longer a simple commercial transaction. It becomes an indirect investment in U.S. state power. Why would Beijing agree to such terms when it has Airbus and COMAC as alternatives? Even in Europe, airlines may increasingly turn to Airbus to avoid the political baggage that comes with Boeing's survival. And then there's the cost. U.S. taxpayers are footing the bill for these rescues, while the companies themselves risk turning into protected monopolies. Shielded from failure, they lose the pressure to innovate and adapt. That leaves them slower, less efficient, and more vulnerable to foreign rivals who are moving ahead at full speed. Beijing doesn't just want to compete, it wants to dominate. And every step Washington takes toward state capitalism hands China the perfect argument. America is no different from us. The real danger is deeper than economics. If the United States begins mirroring China's model, it signals to allies and adversaries alike that the free market can no longer defend America's own champions. Once that perception spreads, confidence in U.S. supremacy erodes, not because of external enemies, but because Washington is showing the world that it doesn't trust its own system anymore. From Washington's shifting strategy, let's turn to Europe, because what's unfolding in Germany right now could reshape the entire continent. For decades, Germany was Europe's industrial powerhouse, the country that set the standard for engineering and exports. Today, that reputation is unraveling, and the latest data shows the decline is accelerating. In the second quarter of 2025, Germany's economy shrank by 0.3%, a steeper contraction than first estimated. That places the country firmly in recession. Exports are falling sharply, machinery investments are down nearly 2%, and construction has also slipped by around 2%. These aren't random dips. They are the direct outcome of U.S. tariffs choking demand for German goods, weak global markets, and an energy crisis that never truly healed after Berlin cut itself off from Russian gas. The pain isn't just industrial, It's reaching households. Consumer confidence has fallen for 3 straight months. In August, German shoppers cut back again, worried about job security and rising costs. When families close their wallets, demand evaporates, and recovery becomes even harder. Berlin's response has been dramatic. The government has suspended its strict debt break rules and launched a €500 billion fund for infrastructure, green energy, and defense. It also allows borrowing above the long-standing 1% of GDP cap, justified under security and climate measures. Goldman Sachs projects 0.4% growth for 2025, a fragile pulse rather than a recovery. Meanwhile, debt is rising well beyond Germany's old limits. The Bundesbank expects the deficit to move past 4% by 2027, with total debt climbing above 66% of GDP. For a country long regarded as Europe's financial anchor, that marks a historic shift. And despite the spending spree, momentum is faint. Business confidence rose slightly in August, but economists warn growth could stall again by the third quarter. Energy remains the deepest wound. Germany is betting heavily on U.S. liquefied natural gas to replace Russian supplies. The EU has pledged $750 billion in American energy purchases, but analysts doubt the promise can be met. German factories need vast amounts of cheap, reliable fuel, and right now, they don't have it. A new LNG terminal at Wilhelmshaven will open tomorrow, providing enough for 1.5 million homes by next year. Helpful, yes, but far too small for an economy of this scale. The result is a nation boxed in on all sides. Tariffs are strangling exports. Energy costs are eroding competitiveness. Emergency spending is pushing debt higher, and ordinary citizens are losing faith in the future. Made in Germany was once a guarantee of excellence. Today, that brand risks fading into history. And if Europe's biggest economy fails to recover, the shockwaves won't stop at its borders. They will ripple across the entire global system. While Germany struggles under tariffs and Boeing pleads with China, another U.S. ally is being pushed into a corner: South Korea. Long celebrated as one of Asia's industrial success stories, Seoul now finds itself under heavy pressure from Washington. Trump has demanded a staggering $350 billion in investments inside the United States, and Korean giants like Samsung and SK Hynix are being forced to contribute more than $100 billion of that total. The demands don't stop with money. South Korea is also being pressed to increase defense spending and purchase more American weapons, even as it faces the same 15% tariff wall that has already hurt Germany and Japan. In semiconductors, Trump insists that Korean chipmakers build fabrication plants on U.S. soil, keeping production under Washington's control. In shipping, Korea has lost ground to China, which now commands more than half of all global ship orders. And in finance, Seoul is preparing to issue bonds in U.S. dollars, an extraordinary step that effectively props up the very currency that much of the world is beginning to move away from. In every direction, Washington's grip is visible. South Korea is being forced to pour resources into U.S. factories, U.S. weapons, and U.S. markets, paying a heavy price for the privilege of staying inside America's economic and security umbrella. The alternative is isolation, a risk no Korean government is willing to take. Put this together with everything else we've seen: Germany sinking deeper into recession, Boeing begging for orders, Washington copying Beijing's state capitalist playbook. These are not disconnected stories. They are parts of the same global puzzle, and the picture that emerges is one of decline. An America that can no longer lead without coercion, allies that are cornered into compliance, and rivals like China that are ready to seize the openings. The stakes are enormous. If this trajectory continues, the balance of global power will not shift gradually, it will lurch. And when it does, the countries that are trapped in the middle, like South Korea, will be forced to choose between Washington's demands and Beijing's rise. Stay tuned and hit subscribe so you don't miss the rapid changes reshaping our world. See you in the next video.